All right, so hi everyone. My name is Dana Wilkos. I'm the health literacy educator for the New Orleans Public Library. I'd like to welcome you to tonight's program, Healthy Relationships 101, a guide to developing healthy relationships in partnership with the New Orleans Health Department's Blueprint for Safety. Please be sure to check out nolalibrary.org for more virtual programming and resources, including our e-resources page where you can find books, movies, and music that you can download and borrow for free with a library card. In addition, Blueprint for Safety has worked to develop a resource guide and a suggested reading list for Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So I'll put a link to that in the chat. Before we jump into tonight's program, I do have a few quick housekeeping notes. First of all, we are recording tonight's session, so it'll be available on our YouTube page for you to reference later or to pass on to anyone you think might find it of interest. So I'll put a link to the YouTube page in the chat, and then I also have email addresses from people who registered so I can send a link once the actual video is posted. Although we're recording the session, all attendees will remain anonymous. We just ask that you put your questions into the chat. I'll moderate those at the end, and I'll be sure to leave out any kind of personal information. And you'll notice that we muted everybody upon entry, and I'd ask that you just leave yourselves muted as any additional background noise can be a bit distracting. So just again, submit any questions or comments into the chat, and we'll get to those at the end. And then with all that out of the way, we'll go ahead and get started. I'd like to introduce you to tonight's speakers. We have Hope Levins and Jocelyn Pinkerton. They're both social workers with the New Orleans Health Department's Blueprint for Safety program, which works with local criminal justice partners to coordinate the criminal legal response to domestic violence. Tonight, as part of their work for Domestic Violence Awareness Month, they'll be discussing ways to develop healthy relationships and how to identify aspects of unhealthy and abusive relationships. So Hope and Jocelyn, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And Jocelyn, I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Thanks, Dana, for that introduction. And we're gonna be sharing a PowerPoint with y'all that we put together. So as Dana mentioned, Hope and I work for the City of New Orleans Health Department. The mission of the health department is to protect, promote, and improve the health of all where we live, learn, work, and play. And the program that we work in the health department is the Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault program. And I think it's important to note that, you know, we really see community violence, intimate partner violence, and sexual assault as public health issues. And so that's why we are located as part of the health department. Next slide, Hope.
Hold on 1 second. There we go.
Okay. So what do we do? At the health department, we are mostly working with sort of policy level programming. We don't provide direct services to survivors, but we do work really closely with organizations that do. And so we do a couple different things. We do a lot of coordination. As Dana mentioned, the New Orleans Blueprint for Safety is a program for coordinating the criminal legal response to domestic violence. So we work with our sort of citywide criminal justice partners and making their response be more survivor-centered. But we also facilitate a sexual assault and domestic violence action coalition, which is a monthly meeting for practitioners to provide training and sort of connections with people that work in the field. We have a couple other groups like that. We have an accountability working group. We also coordinate a couple of different multidisciplinary teams to discuss individual cases. And then we also do training and community outreach. So we are here commemorating Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and we're really happy to be partnering with the public library on this and getting more information out to our community.
Awesome, thanks Jocelyn. Hi everyone, I'm Hope. I am the Blueprint for Safety legal advocate in the New Orleans Health Department. And thank you all so much for coming tonight and for taking some time to discuss aspects of healthy relationships with us on this gloomy Thursday night. So I want to talk a little bit about some objectives that we have for today's workshop. And before I even get into that, I just want to give a little bit of a content warning. We are going to talk about aspects of abusive relationships and domestic violence and dating violence somewhat throughout this training. So just if anyone needs to take space for themselves or time for themselves, feel free. You can always do that or leave whenever you need to, or take care of yourself in any way you need to. So that being said, we're just hoping that y'all leave with some basic skills today. We're going to do a general training for the person who brought up that they were asking if this was a workshop series. It's not a series, so this is a very general overview, but we're hoping that you guys can leave with some tangible skills. So one of them being understanding the aspects of healthy, unhealthy, and abusive behaviors in relationships, learning how to establish boundaries and communicate those boundaries effectively, and also gaining some knowledge of skills needed to promote safety for those experiencing abuse and how to connect those folks to resources. So I just want to ask everyone here if you're able to put in the chat, what is one word you think of when you hear the phrase healthy relationship? We just kind of want to get a sense of what people think in the room, in this virtual room, when they think of healthy relationships. So if anyone's able to enter something in the chat, we'll leave that open for a second. Awesome. I'm seeing secure. That's such a good, yeah. And stable, also really good. Two really great words that kind of encompass what a lot of folks think of. Loving and affectionate, also two really great descriptions. Love, thank you. Yeah. One of the bases of a good relationship. And communication. Yes. Dana, you are gonna segue us into our next slide. So thank you, everyone. Yeah, those are all great, great words to think of when you think of a healthy relationship. So before we get into the different pillars of healthy relationships, we're just gonna talk about why we enter relationships in the first place. So interpersonal relationships come in all forms and they represent bonds or connections between two or more people. When we're born, we enter into a family, whether it be grandparents, siblings, cousins, parents, folks that we consider family raise us from when we're little. And we develop some of those first relationships, those first bonds with with the families that surround us. And then as we get a bit older, we might enter grade school, and we might have relationships with folks who are interested in the same things as us. So whether it be sports, or they like the same movies, or they like the same kind of classes that you're taking, you start to develop friendships kind of independent to those family relationships that you have throughout life, but somewhat more independently of those family relationships. Then we also have acquaintance relationships, which are our coworkers, our neighbors, the people that you see when you go to the store every day, maybe the barista at the coffee shop that you go to. So those are folks that we might have a shared common experience with. Our coworker, we might have a good relationship with them when we're going into work or learning a new protocol. So those are just some examples of acquaintance relationships. And then we also have, finally, and what we're going to focus on today, are romantic relationships. And those are relationships we get into for a multitude of reasons. Like a lot of you are saying, you know, you'll think of like security, stability, love. In romantic relationships, we might be getting into them to date someone for long-term commitment, to have children perhaps, to build a life together. And a lot of folks have those romantic relationships in order to have someone be by your side, have a partner, have someone witness the life that you have built together. People get into them for myriad of reasons, but for a lot of folks, they want that partnership, or that romantic physical partnership. Or maybe not physical too, but there are a bunch of reasons that folks decide to date or get married to someone. So I'm going to call out, thanks Dana for saying communication. There are a couple of pillars to a healthy relationship. One of them being communication. So I'm going to start on the right side, but having that each person in the relationship says what they mean and means what they say without fear of what the other person's going to how the other person's going to react to what they're saying. And also that disagreements come up between partners, but both are willing to discuss and apologize. And we definitely want to recognize the fact that disagreements are going to happen no matter what, throughout all the relationships, throughout many aspects of your lives. People are just going to disagree, and not everyone's going to agree on everything. But when it comes to a healthy relationship, again, that critical thing is that both parties are willing to discuss that disagreement and apologize if there were any wrongdoing in the disagreement. We also have equity. So both partners are treated as equal within the relationship. And partners are cooperative and compromise in a balanced way. And finally, we have respect. So one of the main pillars is that each person is valued for who they are, and each person can express themselves without fear of being judged or ignored. There's that foundational respect to the relationship. So here we have the equality wheel, and I just want to make a note that this is a heteronormative wheel. I was looking for a wheel that was more gender neutral, and unfortunately there are not many that exist in the world, so that is something that I will have to create. But I borrowed this from the Domestic Violence Intervention Project, and often when people see this wheel, they'll recognize it in the context of abusive relationships. There's a power and control wheel that kind of goes over the aspects of abusive relationships. But what I like about this wheel is that it goes over equality in relationships and healthy behaviors. So we'll have like non-threatening behavior. So again, feeling safe to talk and act how one feels in their relationship and comfortable expressing themselves. We have respect. So listening to your partner non-judgmentally, being emotionally affirming and understanding and valuing opinions. We have that trust and support. I know someone said support earlier. Supporting each other's goals, respecting their rights to have their own feelings, their own friends, their own activities, and their own opinions. Negotiation and fairness, so seeking mutually satisfying resolutions to conflict and being willing to accept change and accept when folks are maybe wrong in a situation. Economic partnership, so for folks who are in longer term relationships, making sure that money decisions are made together and that both partners benefit from those financial arrangements or situations. Shared responsibility, so mutually agreeing upon a fair distribution of work. And, you know, usually when we talk about this, a lot of people think of folks who share a household or people who are married, you know, sharing the housework, sharing parental responsibilities. But if you think of dating as well, you know, sharing the responsibility of who's planning the next date or who's going to pick up this dinner, who is maybe in charge of picking us up or giving a ride to someone for the next hangout. I think it's just really important to think about the shared responsibility in all aspects of those romantic relationships. We also have responsible parenting. So for anyone who shares children, you know, sharing those parental responsibilities, being positive role models for the kids that you're bringing up. And lastly, honesty and accountability. So again, no one is perfect. We are gonna mess up in relationships. We might make our partner feel hurt, or we might hurt their feelings by something maybe we didn't even mean to say. But acknowledging responsibility for that and acknowledging that harm and coming together to talk about it in a way that makes both partners feel safe and feel like they're sharing this relationship together. So I also want to show, as before we get into talking about aspects of unhealthy behaviors and abusive behaviors, I want to show this quick PSA video that was made by the That's Not Love campaign, because I think it does a good job of kind of talking about different behaviors in a relationship and how sometimes they get into what seems like a healthy behavior might enter into that gray area of unhealthy. So if you just bear with me for 1 second, I'm going to switch and I'm going to share my other screen. And I'm going to play this video real quick.
Because I love you. I want to be your only guy.
Because I love you, skip class with me. Let's stay in bed today.
Because I love you, I just want to be with you so freaking much. Because I love you.
I waited for you after Chem Lab.
You were walking with Mark?
Because I love you.
You shouldn't be hanging out with that dude.
You should know how dumb that makes me look. I don't care if she's your lab partner.
Why do you have texts from him?
Because I love you. This number, delete.
Because I love you. This Jason number,
Delete.
And Ben,
Delete.
because I love you, I should smash your phone.
I'll let you give me your password instead. Because I love you.
I will check your texts every day.
You got lucky. Because I love you. Because I love you.
You think it's okay.
Because I love you. You understand.
Because I love you, You stop talking to your classmates. You feel completely alone.
Because I love you. That's not love.
All right, thanks y'all for watching that. Any words or any thoughts that come to mind? We can use the chat box for that too after watching that video. Any thoughts or initial reactions? Controlling, yeah. Overbearing and controlling, yeah, definitely. Slippery slope, that's a, yeah, great way to kind of put that spectrum. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for answering that. Let me share my screen again real quick. So yeah, you guys kind of nailed it. Overbearing, controlling, slippery slope. Sorry. Let me just share this. Here we go. Yeah, so what I like about that video is I think it does a good job of representing, like I said before, that, and I love the phrase slippery slope, of that slope from healthy, what might seem as healthy behaviors in the beginning, but kind of entering into that unhealthy territory. Saying because I love you to someone can be really exciting, or saying I love you to someone and saying like you're doing something because you're so excited to be dating them can be awesome. But using that phrase as a sort of manipulative tactic is where things start to get a little bit in the where they start to get in the unhealthy territories. So we're going to talk about these behaviors in a spectrum. So we talked a little bit about the pillars of a healthy relationship. You know, we have respect, we have good communication, we have trust, we have honesty, we have equality. We have two people who are in this relationship together and working on it together. It's not perfect, but they are working on it and they're in it together. And then we have this, then we're starting to get into the gray area. So there might be breakdowns in communication. There might be pressure from one party to the other party for them to do something maybe they're not comfortable with. There might be dishonesty, or which makes one party feel untrustworthy of the other party. There might be struggles for control. So one person in this relationship might be trying to kind of control all the situations, while the other party isn't really sharing equitably in any of the decision making for the relationship. And there might be some inconsiderate behavior. So you know, one partner might come home late and not let their other partner know that they're going to do that, and didn't check in with them, and even though they said they were going to, and you know, that can make the other partner upset because they feel like that person isn't considerate of the fact that they have to wake up early the next day. Or there's a multitude of examples of inconsiderate behavior, but you know, that's where it kind of starts to enter this unhealthy aspect. And then we also have abusive relationships, and within abusive relationships, that's where one partner often does have all the control in the relationship, and there's not a lot of shared responsibility. There's not a lot of shared anything. There might be a lot of accusations that the non-abusive partner is doing things that they might not necessarily be doing. There's a lot of blame shifting, that the non-abusive partner is to blame for anything that goes wrong, whether financially or with kids, or for job loss or anything. The blame can just be put on that non-abusive partner. There could be a lot of isolation. So when we look at this spectrum in a healthy relationship, we talked about how partners kind of want each other to have their own friendships, have their own family life, have their own hobbies, things like that. And then an abusive relationship is where you start to see isolation, where that one controlling partner doesn't want the other partner to have any friends, or might not want the partner to have any hobbies, and instead kind of control all the aspects of their life to make sure that it's just the focus is on that relationship. And then we also have manipulation too. So I know we mentioned controlling, but manipulating your partner. So what I also like about that video is that saying for your partner to do something because they love you even though they're not uncomfortable with it, that's a form of manipulation or a form of coercion that is often present in abusive relationships. So again, just to kind of suss out a little bit more about some more unhealthy relationship characteristics, sometimes folks feel incomplete without their partners, or they might have to rely on their partners for happiness. And we say that this kind of enters into the unhealthy realm because, you know, it's really important for people, like we were saying, to, you know, have a sense of self-identity and a sense of happiness from themselves. And it's perfectly okay to get happiness from your partner. But when it's reliant on just the partner, that can put a lot of pressure on that person in that relationship. Again, there might be game playing or manipulation. There might start to be some jealousy. There might be feelings that are unable to express, or feeling like you're unable to express what you need or what's wanted. And ultimately, there might be an inability to let go if that relationship is not working out. And we also have some red flags of abusive behavior. So again, going to that abusive end of the spectrum, the partner might require constant check-in. The partner might get angry if the non-abusive partner spends time with others. There might be pressure or force to do something that they're uncomfortable with. They might check their devices, like their cell phone or their laptop, without any permission. They might not respect or adhere to the partner's boundaries, and we're going to talk a little bit more about how to set boundaries in a bit. They might constantly make fun of or put down their partner, physically harm them. They could be extremely jealous, insecure, have an explosive temper, or they might threaten or scare their partner. So again, when we think of these things on a spectrum, these are more behaviors that often could be really scary or frightening for someone. So now I want to also use the chat box a little bit more. Now that we have, and I apologize for the ambulances out there, but now that we have a little bit of a perception of the different behaviors from healthy, unhealthy to abusive, I just kind of want to use it's helpful to think of these in real life scenarios. So I want to use the chat box, and what we're going to do is we're going to describe a scenario, and then if you all could let me know what you think, whether it's healthy, unhealthy, or abusive. That's kind of how you're going to let me know what y'all think that scenario is encapsulating. So for scenario 1, we have your partner tells you how special you are and how much they care about you. What do y'all think? Healthy. Awesome. And that would be correct. Everyone wants to be loved and cared for by the partner. So because the relationship consists of 2 people, it's important that each person knows how much the other means to them. So yeah, telling your partner how much you care about them, definitely a healthy aspect. For scenario 2, you and your partner agree to take the night off from texting or calling each other, but while you're out with friends, your partner calls and texts multiple times to say they miss you. What do y'all think? Unhealthy. Awesome. Y'all are on it. That is unhealthy. So again, when we talk about boundaries, we'll suss this out a bit more, but when you make an agreement with someone, you know, they should respect that agreement, and vice versa. You should respect any agreements you make with your partner. So it's important that y'all respect each other's space and the boundaries that you set with one another. So for someone to kind of break that, it breaks your trust a little bit and can enter into that unhealthy realm. So your partner uses a name or a pronoun that you don't like, but they stop using it once you correct them or ask them to. What are we thinking here? Healthy. Healthy, awesome. Yeah, y'all are nailing it. This is an example of a healthy relationship. And that's because, like I said before, we are not perfect. We are gonna mess up, we're gonna do something upsetting, but in a healthy relationship, is that you feel comfortable telling your partner when something upsets you, and that they'll take it seriously and work on it to make sure that you're safe and happy going forward. So after an argument, your partner blocks the doorway and takes your keys to prevent you from leaving. What are our thoughts here? Abusive. Abusive, yes. This one does represent an abusive relationship or abusive behavior. So definitely blocking someone's way is an emotional abuse. When someone's physical safety is threatened, but they're not physically being assaulted, the effect isn't physical, but it definitely has an emotional impact. And we'll hear that a lot from folks, and we've done a lot of work working with people who've been in an abusive relationship and saying, well, he didn't hit me, it wasn't really that bad. But anyone who also causes emotional harm or makes you fear for your safety, that's definitely an abusive behavior or tactic. So number 5, if you have a disagreement, your partner uses the silent treatment and won't talk to you for days. Abusive. Abusive. Unhealthy. Okay, so that one is a bit of a tricky one. And depending on who you are, and I think this is why there's such a gray realm, what we find is this one is usually on the unhealthy spectrum, but for some folks, they might find this abusive, and it all depends on the situation. So for some people, they might know that their partner uses silent treatment as a way to cope, and they might find it more on the unhealthy realm. Other folks might find that this is really manipulative or really controlling in order for to get like a kind of a rise out of the partner, and that would be abusive. But again, it's kind of all of, you always know your relationship best, and you know what your partner is looking for. So here it's described as unhealthy because silent treatment can leave room for more confusion. There'll be days that you and your partner disagree on something. Important to keep the communication strong. But I do appreciate those who said abusive, because I think you're absolutely right. It can be abusive in certain contexts. Again, it just all depends on what's going on with you and your partner. Thank you. Yes, taking space is really different from silent treatment. And I love that you brought that up, because I think the key and kind of what we talked about in the beginning aspect is communication. So if that person had just communicated, I need to take space right now, that would have been totally okay. But you're right, silent treatment can be very unhealthy and abusive. So thanks so much for saying that. I think that's absolutely right. Okay, last one. Your partner randomly stops by your job, even though you told them that it makes you uncomfortable when they do that. What are we thinking here? Unhealthy. Unhealthy. Okay. This one is actually considered abusive. And I'll go through it first. So anytime a partner continues to do something after you tell them makes you uncomfortable, it can be abusive. I think that it also could be an unhealthy range if this is maybe the first time that they've done that. It looks like you've already told them before. But definitely what we'll find often in abusive relationships, and I think why this one is considered abusive, is that partners will take over their other partner's job and try to financially abuse them. And one of the ways is to stop by their jobs in order to cause disruption at work or to mess with their paycheck. So I think that this can often be found in the abusive realm, but I definitely understand how it could be considered unhealthy as well. But I think because in this scenario, you're already telling your partner it's uncomfortable, this might have repercussions for your job or for your paycheck, and they continue to do it, it can be considered abusive. But thank you all for participating. Yeah, I agree. I think that maybe once it could be considered unhealthy and many times definitely abusive. So and again, I think that's where kind of when we think about this, it's definitely in the context of the relationship. So I think there are contexts or relationships where that could be considered unhealthy. So I think you're right there. So thank you. All right, so we talked a little bit about behaviors, and we've kind of like danced around boundaries a little bit, but now we're going to talk about how to establish boundaries and some simple communication strategies that you can use throughout any relationship that you have. So we set and respect boundaries because it's essential to every relationship, and this can be really hard for people. I know for myself, it can be really hard when it comes to friendships to set good boundaries. So I think it's really essential, but it can be really difficult depending on where you're at. It's important that partners feel comfortable expressing their wants, goals, and fears, and that everyone's boundaries are honored. And that means that everyone feels comfortable communicating their needs without fear of what another person will do. So again, when we think about that healthy relationship realm, you're feeling respected in this relationship. You feel like you both are in it. You're both sharing responsibilities. So there's equity in defining these boundaries. And there is communication going on. So there's constant communication about what you all are interested in. So we have some questions for y'all to consider when kind of developing these boundaries with your partner, with your friend, with your family member. And I think one note that I want to make is that, you know, we'll constantly be changing these boundaries. I think your boundaries might be different from someone that you might be on a first date with, as opposed to someone you might be dating for a year. And you have the right to choose what that is for you and what behavior is acceptable for you. So one of the questions is just that, what is acceptable behavior for you and your partner? What is comfortable for you and your partner, and what is uncomfortable? So kind of really sussing out what feels good and maybe what doesn't. And, you know, considering your emotional boundaries. So are you both able to comfortably spend time apart from one another? Do you feel comfortable letting your partner know when you need space or time with friends or family? So I know someone mentioned in one of the past scenarios, silent treatment is different from needing space, but if you can communicate that you need space, there's a totally different feeling that comes with saying that than just total silent treatment. So letting your partner know, hey, I need a weekend away. I need a weekend with my friends. This is not me ignoring you. This is just me needing a little bit of personal space. So definitely, so ways to communicate that. What are your physical boundaries? So are you comfortable when your partner displays affection publicly? I put this one on here because I actually have seen this a lot, where a lot of friends said, you know what, I really don't like when they kiss me in public. I'm just really not interested in it. And then having conversations with their partner afterwards, like, hey, didn't love that you kissed me at the bar the other night. Just because they might be more private. So that's just one thing to consider. Or are you comfortable with having sex at this point in your relationship? So it might be early on that you're really comfortable with it, and that's totally great. And communicating that with your partner is really important. But it might still be a couple months in, or a year in, or 2 years in, and you're not ready for that. And just having that relationship with your partner and letting them know that you're not comfortable. And them also respecting that boundary as well. And then digital boundaries. So are you comfortable sharing social media passwords? Is your partner comfortable with you texting them while they're at work? Just some other considerations to take about. And these are just some questions to consider because, you know, there are so many different boundaries with so many different people that we have to kind of work on. So these are just some things to kind of get us thinking about what those boundaries could be. And some tips. So here's some tips for how to establish these boundaries, whether it be in the beginning of a relationship, or maybe you're 5 years into a friendship and this is something that you want to work on. Or maybe you have a sibling who you really need to start working on creating some boundaries with. I'm thinking of my mom, who used to want to call me every day, and I had to put up a strict boundary for that maybe we can call once a week instead as a compromise. So some ways to do that are to communicate your thoughts with your partner, with your friend, with your family member, and let them know what you're thinking, and communicate that this might be your need, or this might be something that you're interested. So for example, for the digital boundary, I need to keep my social media passwords to myself, and I just need that privacy, and communicating that with your partner. Never assuming or guessing your partner's feelings. So I think this is really important. I think, I'm not going to say we all, but a lot of us tend to mind read our partners, or assume that they're feeling a certain way, or assume they're doing something, maybe even with an intent that's not their intent. So let's try to consider their own feelings, or not guess what they're thinking, and give them the opportunity to talk, to say what they were feeling. So when I think about maybe the person who didn't text when they got home, maybe they were tired, and that's totally okay. And I can see why another partner would be worried if they didn't get a text when they got home. But instead of not addressing that, just trying to enter that conversation and have that conversation with partners. So follow through on what you say. Again, when we were talking about some of the different scenarios, and we saw the job one, for example, right, the texting one that I'm thinking of, where basically they agree to not text each other all night, but the one partner does. well, that broke that trust there. That broke that boundary, and then it gives that person, the other person, permission to break their boundary. So instead, to kind of uphold and keep that trust built, follow through on what you guys said that you're going to agree upon. Keep those boundaries, and that will only help work on trust as you continue your relationship. Taking responsibilities for your actions. So also considering the ways in which we might cause our partners hurt, or we might cross a boundary. And when our partners say they feel hurt by us, if it's in a respectful way, of course, taking the time to really think about what you did to maybe cause hurt in that relationship, to take responsibility for it, and try to set it right with your partner. And then also, lastly, knowing when it's time to move on. So say you've done all these things, you've established boundaries, you've communicated, but this other person might continue to not follow through on what they say. Maybe it's time that person maybe needs another conversation, or maybe it's time to move on from that person, because if they're not respecting your boundaries or respecting what you're saying, maybe you need someone who's going to follow through on the things that you need in a relationship. So just something to consider as well. So tips for communicating these things, or just in general, if you feel hurt in a relationship, or someone hurts your feelings, or a partner says something that just doesn't feel right. Find the right time to talk. I think that's really important. Sometimes I find myself maybe getting angry at something if I'm really stressed at work too. I feel like I will want to take that out on my partner or my friend. That's not the best time to talk, is right after work, because I'm already really stressed out. So often I will try to take some space and maybe take an hour before I address something that's bothering me. Talking face-to-face can be really helpful instead of text message or on the phone, because we can't see people's body language, especially in text message. We can't really gauge the tone of what they're saying. So it can be really important to have that conversation face-to-face. Of course, with COVID-19, what we're living in now, that may not be possible, and that's totally okay. But finding some way to talk that feels like you're able to get your message across. Being honest with yourself and with your partner about what you need. Checking your body language. I know that I tend to tense up if I'm getting angry or getting heated. So checking yourself and trying to have that more open body language when you're talking. Trying the 48-hour rule. This might work for you and this might not work for you. I throw it out there, and this is with anything, just to see what sticks for you and what gels with you. But some people really like to take 2 days before they kind of address an issue. And again, what's really important and what was brought up before is communicating that with your partner first. Hey, I feel upset by this thing, but I want to give myself some time before we really hash this out or really talk about it. That might not work for people, and that's totally fine. So again, figuring out what works for you and your partner. Again, stopping, thinking, talking, and listening. So those are just 4 things to think about. Stop before you kind of react right away. Think about what you want to say, talk about it, and then listen to what your partner has to say. And then finally, using I statements. So those I feel statements or impact statements. You might have already practiced these or used these in your day-to-day, but I just like to bring them up because I always think of them as very simple, but I have such trouble using this in my day-to-day life. So sometimes it's helpful to practice these. So what an I statement is basically stating how you feel, giving a non-judgmental description of the behavior that you observed that made you feel that way, and then stating what you would want to happen next. So I have some examples here for y'all just to kind of look at. So I felt worried when you didn't text me when you got home last night. Next time, I would appreciate if you text me after you got home. So again, stating that feeling, which is worry, giving a non-judgmental description of the behavior, the not texting, and then asking that person to reciprocate next time. I feel frustrated that you dropped by my friend's house without notice yesterday. I'd like for you to give me notice next time. Again, stating that frustration, giving a non-judgmental description of the behavior, and then asking that partner for what they need. Last, we have, I feel uncomfortable when you ask me to have sex after I've already said no. I'd like to date for another month before we consider it. Can we revisit this in a month and see if we're both ready? Again, stating that you're uncomfortable with something and trying to get ahead of it, or trying to express that to your partner and asking and giving almost a compromise at the end, can we revisit this later? And we can also use these statements, and I think it can be easier to kind of practice these in times when we're feeling we might not be feeling worried, uncomfortable, frustrated, stressed, but when we're feeling excited. So I know one of the examples that is used often is, I feel really excited that you brought me flowers. It reminded me of when we first started dating. Or I feel really loved that you took out the trash yesterday when when I was feeling really overwhelmed and busy. So sometimes practicing these when we're in a state of happiness or in a state of gratitude can sometimes be easier. So just some places to start using these types of statements. And these are really helpful because I think it helps take the blame off the other person, which I think is really easy to do when you're upset or frustrated, is, place that blame. But it kind of brings it back to what you're feeling, what you need, and how you kind of want to change things in the future. So now we're going to talk a little bit, Jocelyn's going to take over and talk a little bit about, like we said, we're here in support of Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and we talked a little bit about abusive behaviors in relationships. So if you were to come across anyone to disclose abuse in a relationship, or how to kind of work with them through that and support them.
Yeah, thanks, Hope. So, after going through all these different behaviors, these might be things that you recognize, happen in your own relationships, or maybe recognize that they're happening in the relationships of other people that you know. So we wanted to just take a minute to talk about kind of some strategies for responding to abuse. So thinking about, like, if again, these are behaviors that you're recognizing maybe in someone else's relationship, don't be afraid to reach out to someone who you think needs help. Same thing if you're experiencing abusive behavior in your own relationship, don't be afraid to sort of start talking about it with someone, because these are really sort of common things that happen, I think, either, unhealthy behaviors, or just parts of our relationship that we'd like to improve. So if you do know someone who discloses to you that they have experienced abuse, the best thing is to do is just be supportive, listen, acknowledge their feelings, and be respectful of their decisions. I think sometimes when we're worried about someone, or someone tells us that they've been abused in their relationship, it can feel a little bit scary, like we don't really know how to respond. But really, you don't need to do much to make a big difference. So saying things like, I'm so sorry this happened to you, I feel scared for your safety, thank you for telling me what happened, I believe you, and validating that person. What happened is not your fault, and there are a lot of programs available that might be able to help, and there's a lot of sort of free counseling in our city that will give you some information about, that you can help connect people with. So even if you feel like there's nothing that you can do, being supportive and caring can just really go a long way. So like I mentioned, we do have a lot of resources in New Orleans for free counseling and assistance for folks that want to talk through some issues that might be going on in their relationship. So the Louisiana Domestic Violence Hotline is sort of always there in the state, but the New Orleans Family Justice Center is an agency in New Orleans. They offer emergency shelter counseling. They also offer legal assistance and other types of advocacy. And so that's a great place to call. They have a 24-hour hotline, so you can always, just call and talk to one of the advocates that answers the phone, or suggest if you have a friend or someone that that might be experiencing some abuse, that's a good number for them to call. Metro Centers for Community Advocacy, they do the same thing. They're located in Jefferson Parish. Women with a Vision is another really fantastic organization in New Orleans. That I don't think that phone number is 24/7, but they do have some really compassionate people that work there that can sort of talk to folks that are maybe experiencing abuse in their relationship. And then Sexual Trauma Awareness and Response, that phone number is 24 hours, and they sort of specialize more in working with survivors of sexual assault. So again, some really good resources, and they're all free, so that's exciting. And so, the other thing that I think can be a little challenging is when you're seeing some of these behaviors in a relationship of someone you know, and maybe they haven't reached out to you, but you're, you know, sort of thinking like, okay, how do I bring this up that I'm kind of worried for them? So you can say any of the things on the previous slide, like, you know, I'm really worried for your safety, you know, and there are organizations that might be able to help if you just want to talk to someone about it. And, you know, instead of kind of, you know, labeling for them what they might be experiencing, just offering that there are supportive folks out there that are social workers and counselors and really know how to be compassionate. And so the other thing that's really helpful, let's say someone doesn't really want to reach out to talk to someone else, and that's really understandable because that can be really nerve-wracking, or maybe they're not ready, or that's just not the way that they want to address what's going on. You can always help someone with safety planning if you're concerned about their safety. So a safety plan is a set of actions that can help lower a survivor's risk of being hurt by their partner. So, you know, thinking about someone who might be in an abusive relationship, just what are some steps that they might be able to take to try to increase their safety. So thinking about who are some safe people that they can go to for support. You know, do you have a safe place to go if you need to? The next one, you know, thinking about if you know the partner, you know, how to sort of respond. If you have a coworker, for example, who might be in an abusive relationship, thinking about, you know, what to do if that partner shows up at work. So sort of just being in the know of like how you can be helpful in terms of responding to an abusive partner that you might know also. Because the other thing is that, you know, disclosing that abuse is going on in a relationship can actually be really dangerous, because part of the controlling behavior can be, again, what Hope was talking about with, you know, an abusive partner might try to use isolation. And so reaching out can be a big risk for folks that might experience abuse. So really being careful about how you respond to them and you know, take your cue from what they need is really helpful. So do you need help connecting to any resources? So again, we have some really great counselors in the city that can help. And then maybe they need some other assistance, like with childcare or transportation, or just, is there anything else that you can do to help out? And I think the most important thing here is to really take your cue from the person who's being abused, because they know what's going to be best and safest for their situation. I think a lot of times we have this idea that, you know, why does someone stay in an abusive relationship? They should just leave. But a lot of times it's really complicated, and there's a lot of reasons why, you know, leaving could be more risky, or, you know, it's just someone isn't quite ready to do that yet. So it's really important to be supportive, even if someone wants to stay in their abusive relationship for whatever reason. But safety planning can be helpful for trying to minimize the amount of risk that they face. So remember to listen and be supportive, even when you don't understand or necessarily agree with their decision. Try to resist judgment. So, you know, we just want to be there as a supportive, a support for them. And I think that's it. So, you know, again, here, Hope and my contact information is here. Again, we're both social workers. You know, feel free to reach out if you'd like to, and we're happy to talk more about healthy relationships or any questions that you might have.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you all for coming tonight. And I just want to say, you know, we gave you a really intense crash course almost in healthy relationships and unhealthy, abusive, and there are so many resources out there. So loveisrespect.org and breakthecycle.org are two organizations where I pulled a lot of this information from, because I think they do it in a really user-friendly way. So I really like to let everyone know to go to those websites if you want any more resources, because I think they're both wonderful organizations that have a lot of information. But yeah, as Jocelyn said, our email's right there. So if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to us. Or if you have any other questions right now, I think we have about 5 minutes left. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to pop it in the chat box, or feel free to say it out loud.
I actually have a question that I don't want to put you on the spot about, but I've been thinking about throughout this. You know, I feel like in the last few years, especially, we hear so much about gaslighting and I think that a lot of people, that's a really hard thing to communicate with someone about, because it is like blatantly lying and twisting versions of the truth to fit within your own reality, or whatever you want to call it. So again, not to put you on the spot, but do you have any thoughts about kind of how to communicate with people who do that?
That's a really awesome question. And I think that's something that we hear about all the time working with survivors. And it's called so many different things depending on what region you're in. I know I'm from Philly, so like everyone calls it crazy making. Gaslighting is really big right now. I think that was something that became more popular in the past couple of years, is using that term. But I think when people feel that way, especially if your friends are telling you that those things are happening, normalizing that your friend is not, and I'm using this word very quotes because they'll say this, normalize that they are not crazy or they're not making this up. Believe those people when they might tell you that, you know, I told Dana that, say Dana's my partner. Dana said that I was acting like really, really out of line for being upset that she didn't text me when she got home. Is that something that, is that normal? And I do have people who reach out to me and they kind of give you those little hints of like, is that normal? When your friends come to you or your family members, let them know that it's not, you know, and kind of help them combat some of those things that maybe abusive partner is telling them. I think those are some ways to kind of help folks who are in that. When it comes to actually combating the partner who's saying those things, I think there are a lot of maybe safety planning things that go into confronting that partner, because it may not be safe for them to kind of confront. But I think how I want to answer this is as a friend or as a family member, you know, letting that person know you believe them and that you don't think that they're making things up, and that, you know, you're not to blame for anything that the partner is blaming them for. So I don't know if that totally answers your question, but I'm hoping that gives a little.
That's helpful, thank you. Does anyone else have anything? Okay, well, thank you both for doing this tonight, and thanks everyone for coming. As I mentioned, I'll be sending a link out with a recording of this program. I'll also put some additional links for resources, including some of the stuff that you mentioned, Hope, and the library page and all that stuff. So thank you again, and everyone have a great night.
Thank you, Dana.
Thanks.
I see the comment. Thank you so much. I'm glad that you took something from it. If you have any questions, you have our email. Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Bye, everyone.
All right.